Boyd Barrett, please.
As you mentioned housing, and particularly social housing, as I've said a number of times over the last few weeks, a major national demonstration will be taking place on April the 7th to demand precisely that the government break from its current reliance on the private sector, private developers and landlords, to deal with the housing emergency, and for the state itself, through the local authorities, to build the council houses we need. And in that context, we were provided with a perfect instance on Sunday in the Sunday Business Post, in really an article that shocked even me, and it takes a fair bit to shock me, where Richard Barrett, formerly of Treasury Holdings, a developer who was NAMAD had to buy out their loans for €1 billion with public money, is now boasting that he's going to be the biggest provider of social housing outside the state itself as part of the Rebuilding Ireland plan. In what I understand, arrangements negotiated with Minister Murphy's department, he said he was very pleased with the amount of the generosity of the Minister, of his time with Bartra Capital, financed by Mr Barrett himself and international investors, who are going to provide 1,200 social housing units on a long-term lease basis for 25 years at 95% of market rents. Mr Barrett and his investors are very pleased with the deal because they are going to make an absolute killing out of this. 1,200 units at current rents, which are on average, the average rents now, the cost of this nationally will work out at about 400,000 per unit for those 25 years for the state, not taking into account likely rent increases. Multiply that by 1,200 and you're talking about in excess of 400 million cost to the state. The fact that most of them will be built in areas like Dublin and the urban centres means, in fact, it will be a lot higher, where average rents are higher, where you're talking almost certainly in excess of €500 million for 1,200 units. Mr Barrett and Bartra Capital and his property speculator investor friends are going to make an absolute killing. When we could build, the state could directly build those houses for a fraction of the cost. At the end of the process, the state would own them. We would generate rental revenue, would come back to the state instead of hundreds of millions going out to his friends. And when you consider that under Rebuilding Ireland, as well as Bartra, there's going to be 10,000 of Minister Murphy's planned 50,000 units are going to be leased in this manner, we are looking at a bill of billions going out to private developers to benefit from the social housing emergency they helped to create. How can you possibly justify this? It's obscene.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy. It's not the first time we had this engagement. Just to say a number of things. You're right on one thing. We do have a social housing emergency, and we're dealing with it in a way that is multifaceted. We are encouraging and inviting private investment to solve the problem, as well as committing billions of euros of public money to also solve the problem. The difference between you and me, though, Deputy, is that you don't like the fact that anybody may actually be able to make a profit on the back of solving a problem or helping to solve a problem. You only want the state to be involved in social housing and nobody else. And the problem with that strategy is that you are expecting the state to do all of the heavy lifting. What we have is a policy now which is about encouraging private sector investment, yes, in social housing solutions, as well as complementing massive public sector investment as well. Because we have to continue the trend. Last year we delivered 3 times as many social houses as was delivered the previous year. And next year we'll have to deliver 3 times again. And we'll have to keep building that up until we get close to 10,000 units a year being delivered into social housing outcomes to ensure that we deal with the scale of the problem. You know that while we are gearing up to that, we do have to have a significant reliance on the private rental market, which you always keep criticising as well. But your solution is not deliverable overnight. It takes time to dramatically scale up the delivery of social housing by the state, by approved housing bodies, by the private sector. And what we are doing is looking at different ways of ensuring that when you combine those different approaches, you get a massive response in terms of delivering new social housing solutions, which is what we're about. Because of the scale of the problem and because of the fact that for nearly 10 years we didn't have the resources to be able to put into social housing that has now created an extraordinary demand, particularly in this city, but also in other parts of Ireland as well. So you shouldn't simply just pick one element of the solution and ditch it for some ideological reason that you don't like to see somebody investing in solutions on the back of getting a modest return on that. That is part of a solution that is about getting families into decent homes that they know they have security of tenure in for long periods of time, and out of the kind of pressurised situations that many of them find themselves in today.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Boyd Barrett.
I don't know whether you're missing the point or just trying to throw mud in the eyes of the people out there. According to the Sunday Business Post article, this development is going to cost $400 million. And I've just outlined how at an absolute minimum based on current average rents, at the end of it, the state will have paid for that development and a hell of a lot more on top. They will have paid between 400 and 500, maybe in excess of 500 million. At the end of it, though, having paid for it, we won't own it. Mr Barrett and his friends can pull out of the lease arrangement after 25 years, walk away with a massively valuable asset, evict the social housing tenants, having made an enormous profit. As against if we spent that same money, which we are paying for either way, directly in building council houses, we would have security for social housing tenants, we would have had rental revenue coming into the state, we would own the asset at the end of it, but none of that is going to happen because you are insistent that Mr Barrett and other property speculators have to make a profit, extortionate profits, out of a social housing emergency that is blighting the lives of tens of thousands of families in this country.
Deputy, I respectfully suggest that you're missing the point, not me. Money is not the obstacle to delivering social housing right now. Local authorities that have good projects on their books are getting the funding that they need to progress them. The challenge is capacity to deliver the scale of social housing delivery that we want in the time that we have in terms of the demands that people have for social housing. So we have an enormous increase in housing budgets to deliver on that social housing need. But we also want to get on top of that, to complement what we are doing, we want private sector investment as well, and private sector capacity delivering social housing solutions under long-term leasing arrangements, so that we get people out of private sector rental accommodation where they don't have the kind of security of tenure that they maybe are looking for, into long-term leasing arrangements for 10 or 20 years, where they will get the kind of security of tenure that they are looking for. And so there is a role for the private sector here to add to numbers in terms of delivering social housing solutions, which needs the scale of delivery that I think you're looking for, but can't deliver the kind of scale that you're looking for purely through local authority-led schemes.
Deputy Eamon Ryan, please.